And welcome to another podcast. And today we have a special guest, Phil, who is the owner of an MG34 and an MG42, and who has actual experience with both of them, shooting them and maintaining them. Welcome, Phil.
Hi.
What I learned already from you is there's a main difference between the MG34 and the MG42, namely that the one was a weapon constructed in peace, whereas the other was a wartime production. Now, what does this bring with it?
Well, I think one of the main really differences in this production type is the MG34 is like a fine Swiss watch. Everything is tight tolerances, let's say expensive material, a lot of machining and lathe work. In comparison to the MG42, this is really the cheap watch from China. It's stamped material, minimal efforts in, let's say, heavy or expensive work like lathe working and turning. And it was really a mass production item. The MG34 was also, let's say, a mass production, but with a lot of more efforts, a lot of more machines involved to produce. It has tighter tolerances. For instance, the bolt in the lower receiver is very tight. Is compared to the MG42, it's rather loose or has more play. And this is really, when you put them side by side, it's really high finish versus low quality, more or less. But they both worked in the end.
So, due to the more tight and more precise coupling of the MG34, there was, I think, as far as I know, one major issue that, for instance, if ammo was a bit dirty or something, you could have a jam or some problems, which didn't happen with the 42. Is this correct?
I think a good indication for the 34 is that all the pictures you see of Wehrmacht soldiers they either carried in ammo in boxes, in the 250 or 300 round boxes, or the drum magazines, and never loose around the neck. And this is really crucial that you don't get any dirt inside the machine gun, or you have rather bigger problems to cleaning it. The MG42 is more forgiving in that aspect. So you suddenly see pictures of German soldiers carrying the ammunition around the neck, or no longer in the boxes, because they could do it. It would still work to a reasonable reliability. When you look at the system of the 34, for instance, when you attach the drum magazine and the 50-round drum magazine with the belt, with one belt, it's a really closed system. There's not much ways of getting dirt into the system. But when you have a dirty belt, it's going to be, then it's going to jam. It's very, very prone to malfunction.
And since you also have experience with shooting both weapons, what is, in your opinion, the major difference?
I think the MG34 is more pleasant to shoot. It has around 900 rounds per minute. The recoil is really straight into your shoulder. So you don't have this, when you bring your body behind the gun, you can really, let's say, keep the focus on aiming towards your target. The MG42 with the 1,200 rounds, 1,500 rounds, that's always a big discussion in the forums. I always say the normal MG42 had around 1,200 rounds per minute. Your vision of the world becomes blurry. It's really hard to get out of that tunnel vision. It's more violent. It's also a little bit fact that the MG42 is a little bit lighter and has a higher rate of fire, so you have more of that recoil impulse affecting your shoulder or your body. And for me, the MG34 is a better shooting machine gun, from instance, from a bipod. It's more pleasant and more precise as a shooter. You don't lose that situational awareness that much. I always refer to it a bit like, if you remember Band of Brothers, the TV show, there's this attack on Carentan in the third season where you see that the Americans attacked town, and they tapped the machine gunner on the head, on the helmet, that he should shift his fire to the other direction. And that's really have the same experience. You suddenly lose the situational awareness with the MG42 because it's, you experienced it as well. It's brute force. It's really, it shakes you. It's a little bit punishing.
So basically you get more in kind of zone, and with the MG34 you still have the control and you have a wider view and everything.
Yeah, it's not so, you don't fight with the gun. In MG42, you really press that gun into your shoulder and you really fight the gun a bit because high rate of fire, and it shakes you. And the MG34 is really, if you're trained, if you have enough experience with it, like you would expect from a Wehrmacht soldier, it's more really a rifle, a machine gun that allows you to also scan a bit and not lose traction of what's happening. And this makes you a little bit more independent.
Okay. Do you also have experience shooting it from a tripod, both of them?
Yes.
So is there a difference here?
No, I think tripods is what often is lost in the articles and Wikipedia stuff and YouTube videos is that the machine guns for the German army were really systems. It was not just the MG34 or the 42. It was a system with the tripod. The tripods was very well made. It was also labor intensive to make, but it had its purpose. You could really shoot areas. It was really an aerial of denial system. And in that role, it doesn't really matter what you use. Both are plenty accurate enough and have enough high rate of fire. And let's say in a static position, both are excellent, really excellent.
So you don't lose the overall vision when the MG42 is on a tripod?
No, not at all. Also, you have to remember that in such a thing, when mounted to a tripod, it's the heavy version. Let's say it this way.
Yeah,
you're not alone. You have mostly an NCO that spots for you, that also calls your targets, shift light, right or left. You aim by tracers because you can really actually see the tracers. You're disconnected from the gun. The gun is on itself. You're just sitting behind it. And it's just it's like a bicycle wheel, more or less. You're just steering it, and you even have an optic that a lot of other machine guns didn't have. You have a magnifying. I'm not sure anymore if it's magnifying or not because they are really rare optics. They're also very expensive from a collector side.
And a short note for our listeners. Now, the MG34 and 42 were both general purpose machine guns, but in the Wehrmacht, on a bipod, they were considered light machine guns, leichtes Maschinengewehr, and on a tripod, they were considered heavy machine guns, schweres Maschinengewehr. So in the German army, the use was usually defining in terms of light and heavy. You have the similar with the Panther tank, which also was considered medium tank. So, because some people say, okay, this wasn't the heavy machine gun. I say, no, in the Wehrmacht, in the military sense, it was for them on a tripod, but not in the caliber sense. For instance, if you go from the technical detail, no, it was not a heavy machine gun.
No, it was not I think from the technical side, from the caliber side, you could say it was a medium machine gun on the tripod. And heavy was, let's say, in American terms, was called for the M2 Browning, the 50 caliber, or the Russian Dushka, the other 50 caliber from the Russian side. German. Doctrine or textbook, it was heavy. The heavy machine gun was tripod.
And this is also a thing due to naming, because in the Wehrmacht there were a few exceptions where there was medium. Basically, they only had leicht and schwer, light and heavy. For instance, for the artillery, they didn't have medium artillery; they had leichte Feldhaubitze and schwere Feldhaubitze. So this
Yes, it was.
this can get lost in translation easily for people who are not aware of this.
Yeah, very good point. As I said, the tripod is a system in itself, and it had a lot of nice features like the Tiefenfeuerautomat or something and a very good optic that you could scale for distance, for elevation automatically, and etc. I think a lot of people lose this this point because it's really a system. It was the MG34, for instance, was also a really modular machine gun. It was a general purpose machine gun. It was used for the plan was to use it for almost everything that required a machine gun. And yeah, as with your tank series, the Königstiger, it was really meant, that's why the barrel change is a little bit different. But mounted on a tripod, the barrel change is no issue because it just tilts the barrel jacket to the side. But when you use it on a bipod, it's a little bit difficult because you have to turn the low receiver to the side.
Yeah.
But on a tripod, that's easy. You just switch Unfortunately, I don't have a tripod, an original 34. They're rather rare in my country. And maybe one day I will get one, but we'll see.
I think not only in your country, I guess everywhere.
Yeah, it's a thing that these accessories, let's call it accessories, are very rare. So the optic, I've only seen it once, and it was an absurd price. The tripod, I have only seen it twice, I guess, and they didn't want to sell. So, well, maybe someday I will get one. But yeah, it's my. That's a thing about the collector. You're not a collector for 5 minutes. You're a collector for your whole life.
For life, yeah.
Yeah, I've searched for items for many years now, and I know I will get one day, but yeah, we'll see.
I notice I have this with information usually.
Yeah, yes, it's you see this as a collector, you need patience, motivation, and also money. It's for instance, I have some issues with my MG34 of reliability, but then on the other hand, I have to say it's an 80-year-old gun. Mine is stamped from 39, and yeah, I cannot go to Amazon.com and order a new set of springs for an MG34. It doesn't work that way. If you need replacement parts, you're looking for years. That's a little bit the difficulty of collecting these items.
I think this also connects to something, some misconception that are out there on some comments on YouTube or something. If people see somebody shooting with an MG34 and then they have some jam or something, and people say, okay, it's an unreliable gun, and therefore it was replaced with the 42. What do you say about that?
Let's say if you go back to the year like 1938 and would get a brand new MG34 from the factory with German Wehrmacht ammo and German Wehrmacht belt, this gun would run for thousands of rounds without a problem. The problem nowadays is the guns are old. The Germans never had the best spring steel in the whole war. That one of the reasons for the MG42 to have this double coil recoil spring was because the lack of quality spring steel. The Americans never had this problem. They always had very good spring steel. And yeah, it's a machine gun. The operation of a machine gun is really a very well-oiled machine. Every part has to play its role and has to be perfect. It's like driving an old-timer car. You spend a lot of time fixing the car so you can drive it for 1 or 2 hours. And replacement parts are impossible to get. And yeah, it's a little bit the same with all the machine guns. And the problem with when you collect German guns in general, they have been used. They have been somewhere on the Ostfront, maybe somewhere on the West Front, maybe, I don't know, in Africa, and they have been used extensively. So there's wear and tear. There is, they're not to spec anymore. Finding good ammo for shooting it is difficult. Factory ammo is a little bit on the weaker side, so you don't have that, let's say, Wehrmacht load. And all this leads to, then you see a video on YouTube and a guy shoots 200 rounds through an MG34 and has 2 jams, and people then complain, this gun is unreliable, that's why they changed it. And I say, no, it's an old gun. You can't find replacement parts, and that's the reality as a collector you have to accept. My gun as well, the MG34, has problems. And if I can shoot, let's say, 100 rounds with maybe 1 jam, I'm happy. That's, for me, the best I can do at the moment.
I mean, it makes sense. It's a high precision tool. You have old parts, and then also, it was made for one specific type of ammo, and if you have less power in it or too much, there's a problem. So I actually never realized this before I talked to you, that okay, there's different power in each shot if they are made in a different factory. And I was like, okay, I never thought about that, but it makes absolutely complete sense. Yeah, and
it's the German controlled everything when they produce for the Wehrmacht. They had tight acceptance tolerances, for instance, and that's another thing with Wehrmacht parts. They are all stamped with the eagle, so they were approved by some form of testing board or quality control. That's how they guaranteed the replacement parts coming in were actually good, not creating more problems. And this is really after war. There was a lot of ammunition, 8mm Mauser, or the 7.92 by 57 Mauser, which is the military term, was quite common. A lot of countries had this caliber, but all this ammo supply is no longer available. It has been all used, or it is simply too old. I have other machine guns. I shoot ammo from 1938. It works, but it's a little bit on the, let's say, old age of ammunition. That's almost 80-year-old ammunition that still works more or less. And that's a little bit the problems you have as a, let's say, World War II gun collector. And especially then with German machine guns. Where, you see, it's all a little bit a timing question. A machine gun is a timing machine, that everything has to be just right. You have a little bit of play. Let's say an addition of friction is okay, but everything has to. It's always. It's hard to tell. You lose 5% there, 5% there, 5% there, and suddenly it reached the point where it's no longer reliably working.
I mean, I think it's more easier to understand for people. If you look at the fire rate of 1,200 shots per minute, that means 20 shots per second. Okay, that's like, if there is not much, let's say, leeway to have in this, with this amount of power. I mean, this is also a very strong round and everything. So if there's a problem there, a minor problem, it's actually quite amazing that after 80 years it still works.
It's a little bit a testament to the design, honestly. You see, in the MG34, you can debate it a bit, but it's mostly one of the first of its kind. First really general purpose machine gun for every part that needed a machine gun. It was really a doctrine. Let's switch from the water-cooled systems and the light machine guns like the British used, the Bren and the Vickers. Germans said, we want one machine gun. And for this role, it was a very good designed machine gun. It was modular. Today we would call it modular. You could adapt it to situations when you needed it. The problem is, as we mentioned in the beginning, it was a peace project. It was a peacetime designed machine gun when you have availability for all the special materials that you needed for building it. Time or production time wasn't really an issue during peacetime. If you produce 300,000 machine guns in 5 years or 10 years in peacetime is not really important. What you need in peacetime is a machine gun that can sustain a lot of training, let's say it this way, because these are being used and they shouldn't be damaged or destroyed after 1 year of training. When you go to war, you need an MG42. It's cheaper to produce, and I don't really think cheap in money issues, money terms, more in labor terms and special machinery and special materials. You take an MG42 because let's say the experiences of the Ostfront is a machine gun survives 20,000 rounds, or it can shoot 20,000 rounds before it's destroyed or captured by the enemy. You don't need a machine gun that can shoot 1 million rounds before failure. It's useless to have such a good machine gun.
Yeah, that makes absolutely sense. Yeah, and the other aspect was that Germany wasn't particularly good in mass manufacturing even before the war, and even during the war there were major problems. I mean, I read just now there was only one tank factory that actually employed a manufacturing belt. Only one in total. They never had one because, I mean, for several issues, and so this is Germany back then in the 30s was already industrialized, but standardization wasn't so high, and also mass production. It was not that focused on mass production yet, like there was in the United States. So they're coming from a different approach, both from the military side and also from the industrial side.
It's funny, I often talk with my collector friends about when we compare American machine guns or automatic weapons to the Germans, that the Germans were much more aware what they needed to achieve their goals with the maneuver warfare, the Bewegungskrieg, etc. And the Americans didn't care or didn't focus on developing a real good light machine gun, but they had the manufacturing capability. They had really the manufacturing capabilities to produce thousands of Thompson submachine guns, but the Thompson was also very expensive to produce. But they didn't care. They just produced them, and I think it's funny that the Americans went to war with not a really good machine gun. I owned a 1984 before, and for me it's a reliable machine gun, but it's yeah, I'm gonna create a lot of hate now. It's not a good machine gun. It's useless as a light machine gun. They tried to put it in a light machine gun role with the A6, but they made it more heavy, and it's really not. They didn't have an understanding of modern warfare. Well, modern for the Second World War. What modern warfare demanded of the battlefield. Again, I think the Russians were quicker in adapting to the Bewegungskrieg from the Germans because they simply had to.
Yeah, I think
otherwise they would be. Yeah.
The main difference, the United States basically, I think they had a smaller army than Germany under the Versailles Treaty at one point. So and they always have the Atlantic and the Pacific on both sides. I mean, this is also why the Americans usually focus way more on logistics, because as I wrote today in an email, before you guys can fire one shot, you need to cross several thousand miles of sea. So I mean, I think when an American goes to war, they basically have to do more calculations in terms of logistics than one country that decides to attack every neighboring country in Europe, for instance, because there's different aspects. And I think the 1919 wasn't really used at a squad level too. They had the BAR for that, I think. So so there's a major problem, in this regard.
The BAR is I have a hard time labeling the BAR or its role, because a collector friend of mine has a BAR, and it has a BAR also with a bipod. And the bipod on the BAR is just, oh, we don't have a bipod on the BAR. We need a bipod quick. And you need pliers to set the bipod on a BAR. You really have to,
Yeah, okay.
They just cannot deploy it like on a Bren. You need the pliers to apply the bipod on the BAR, and you have 20 rounds in the magazine. This is nothing.
Yeah, and you can't reload as fast as with the Bren, because with the Bren you just pull out and you put it in. I was quite surprised when we did this, how fast you can change, but with the BR you can't, so you can't sustain the fire. I think most people agree that the BR wasn't really, I don't know, I can't classify it either, because it was like, especially later on when they had the M1 Garant, because I mean,
another thing is, again, I guess with the BAR is it was available. We had produced it, and we don't have a solution now. And the Americans had a little bit of the dilemma, as you said, logistics. They had, a new design had to work. They didn't have the luxury to sending it back to the factory. They had to make a design, and that's why that's something that most people don't understand, is designing a machine gun is really difficult. It's not so an easy thing that you sit down on a table for 5 hours and then you have a machine gun. It's mostly months of designing and then testing materials and everything before even the army thinks about adopting it. And what the Germans did with the MG42, for instance, it's like the impression that, we run into troubles on the Ostfront, we need a new machine gun that's cheaper to produce. The development of the MG42 started earlier.
Yeah, I read this up now. It basically started, I think, right after the 34 or very soon after that.
When they started with 39, with Poland, the invasion of Poland, they realized, we have a lot of losses of MG34 in a way that they're not repairable, or it's too expensive to repair. And then they wanted something that's a little bit, there's always a little bit different information. It's hard to say what's really true, but I guess they always had the idea, we test the concept, see if it works, and if it doesn't work, or we have to find the things to improve that it really works. And what they realized is that, the doctrine of this light machine gun, heavy machine gun combination with the Schützen squad, it works more or less, but we need something a little bit cheaper or better or easier to produce. That's something they realized very quickly. And then they started designing it. What's more funny, actually, because between the MG34 and the 42 is they don't share one single part, which is rather uncommon for production of. The only thing that they share is a machine gun belt for the ammunition, and the ammunition, that's the same. That's the only two factors, and the Gurttrommel. That's the only thing that fits on both. Beside that, I think almost everything was produced differently.
Yeah, completely. I mean,
or let's say cheaper.
The 32 was an extremely complicated design, and also everything was machined basically. Yeah. And the 42 has a lot of stamped parts. So it was really also the design of the things that needed machining are much simpler. When you looked at the bolt, you had these two rollers. These are easy to do. The bolt head is easy to do. And the 34, that's a complex piece of equipment with different machining cuts and everything. And at the production time, or let's say, there was no CNC machining that had 5 axes or something. It was just one tool bench after the other. And you just placed the parts there and cut the cuts you had to cut. And everything is much simpler than the MG42. They completely redesigned machine gun from scratch. I mean, that's something a little bit astonishing, honestly, because normally designs of such machine gun is rather complex.
I find it funny when people say, yeah, you should make it more easy or more simpler or whatever. Yes, but normally if you do engineering work and you have to find a solution to a problem, it's always a complicated solution at first. And once you have some sort of solution, then you can start to make it better or simpler. But it's really hard to do a simple solution on the first draft.
I can exactly. I mean, I see this even with my video designs. When I first did some of the animations and infographics, and then I did it the second time, and I realized, okay, there are way easier ways to do this. There's always first you have to be effective, and then you can go for optimization and efficiency. But first, if it's not effective, I mean, it doesn't make sense if the gun doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense to optimize it. Oh, we have a gun that doesn't work now, but it's really efficient in its production. Yeah, great.
I think the first draft is always solving the problem. I think that's quintessential for all engineering work. Is first draft is always fixing the problem, and then when you fix the problem, is how can you fix the problem? How can you still fix the problem with a simpler method?
Yeah, and to a certain degree, sometimes fixing the problem the first time actually makes you understand what the real problem is or define it clearer. Because sometimes you think you have a problem and then you realize, oh, actually that was not my problem, or it's a way more complicated, or actually a more simpler problem, and then you realize, okay, we need a different solution here.
Yeah, it's a little bit also in the direction of minimalistic problem solving. What's the most simplest or easiest item that solves that problem? Because overachieving doesn't bring you much in certain ways. For instance, an MG42, yes, you could bring it up to 1,500 rounds a minute. But why? I mean, why? On a tripod, area of denial, maybe you would benefit from 300 rounds more per minute in the area or not. But I think 1,200 rounds is plenty sufficient. 900 rounds a minute, like in the 34, is also sufficient as a suppressive fire method. I mean, even the Bren with its 500 to 600 rounds per minute was a very good light machine gun at pressing enemy infantry. It was enough. Also, a lot of people don't know is that the earlier versions, the first 2000 MG34, had a rate reducer in the pistol grip. You could switch from 900 to 400 rounds per minute. And it was generally seen that 900 rounds per minute was used for anti-air, where you need that extra rate of fire. And 400 rounds was considered enough for ground combat. They dropped the system because it was, again, a little bit too German and too complicated. And I never have actually seen it. They are very rare, but it was too complicated and it was not really necessary. They said, okay, we can do with both. And we rather have 900 rounds per minute because we, again, are in the general purpose machine gun. So we can use it instantly from fire support, ground fire support to anti-air. Without worrying that the soldier has to switch.
Around and complicate everything. Yeah.
Yes. Because that's one thing in combat, you don't have the luxury of thinking sometimes.
Yeah, you just need to act, and it has to work.
Yeah, it has to work simply enough, and that's when I have discussion with my friends about the Bren and the MG34, for instance, about light machine gun role. We all think that actually the Bren is really the better light machine gun in, let's say, quick reaction to a threat. For engaging, for instance, the safety, it's really at your thumb. With the MG34, you have this safety, you have to a little bit press in and then press forward. It's not so, let's say, you can't easily do it in a hurry, or you have to get good training to do it in a hurry. With the Bren, you're unsafe. A threat. It's really on your thumb. Forward and blast it. And that's what they did better in the MG42. It's also at your thumb. You just press it with your thumb and you're ready to fire. On the other hand, you also have to say when you, for instance, in the Ostfront and it's a cold winter and you have these thick gloves, the MG34, I don't know if you really can operate the safe. When you have thick, it needs training. In the 42, I have to say it's rather easy. It's because when you engage or disengage the safety, it goes flush against the pistol grip. It's not sticking out. You just can press it through and it's okay. There's no dent. There's no nothing. The MG34 is really okay. Maybe we have to test it. Maybe.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
Wearing thick gloves and for also maybe changing the barrel with thick gloves. I think the MG42 is a lot of lessons learned, and then they adopted it. I mean, the barrel change system is really a design decision that they made. Okay, we're never going to use the MG42 inside the tank, so they can make this really quick barrel change system, which is another thing. I think it's funny on movies like Saving Private Ryan or something, and they say, "I'll wait for him to change the barrel." Yeah, okay, that's 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 seconds, and then he has changed the barrel and continues shooting. Okay, what do you achieve in 3 seconds? I mean, it's really the funny things, and it's a lot of unfortunate myths that prevail, and they get repeated over. I think you know the problem better than I do. That these myths are hard to. It's always blitzkrieg.
Yeah. And the thing is, you need probably half a second to realize he's changing the barrel.
Yeah.
Because if he fires in bursts, how you know and it's also pretty loud, so you probably can't even hear it. I mean, Block on the Range, I think, made this video with the M1 Garand that you can't basically hear the clip. Something so. If you can't hear this click out, I don't think you hear the barrel change on an MG42. Because when you hear it being pulled out, it's probably the next second the next one is already in.
Yeah, and also, another thing is what people don't want to know is they have this image of Rambo. You're alone on the front, and you have to kill that storming horde towards your position. You're never alone.
Yeah.
War is a team effort, and you're not even. I don't think that Germany would use this machine gun alone. There are only probably 3 machine guns simultaneously firing at one position. And we in the army, we had 3 machine guns, and you would coordinate when one would change barrel and reload and such, that the others would take up the suppressing fire. And that's really a thing that, wait for him to change the barrel. Yeah, there are 2 other machine guns, and he has riflemen as well that would open up firing on your position. It's
that's the thing. I mean, that's what I said in my most famous video, the German squad tactics, where I said, but these tactics were not alone. The squad was not acting alone on the battlefield.
No, it's a team effort, and that's the sad thing about computer games like Call of Duty. They try to make the team effort a little bit, but it's still you are the superhero killing everybody. No, war doesn't work that way. Also, there's tanks, there's mortars, there's artillery, there's airplanes. It's an army. I mean, we always trained in our army. Defensive fire for 2 minutes, then withdraw, because then the enemy artillery strike would hit you. And it's a combined arms. It's a complete integration of every weapon system you have. It's not just they're only infantry. We only take rifles to fight this war. No, we take everything we have. It's and I think this is really a lot of myths about. Also shooting the machine guns. People think it's unpleasant. I often get, when I have discussion with people that never shot machine guns before, they think it's unpleasant or it's brutal. I don't know what you experienced.
Yeah, I was concerned that I could break my shoulder easily, if you remember.
Yeah.
So then nothing happened at all. So it was like you told me in the right beginning. Yeah, if you if you really put it in a bad place and then you're really stupid and everything, yeah, then you can break your shoulder. But besides that, and it was, I nothing hurt. I mean, going on a heavy metal concert the next day, a lot of stuff hurts, but after shooting your machine guns, no, nothing really hurt. So yeah, this is. I mean, it's definitely I mean, it's pleasant in a way, but not pleasant for everyone, I would say. Yeah, this is.
Yes, it's. I think intimidating would be the best word. I think people are a little bit afraid of it because of the sheer volume of noise and it moves in your shoulder. It's not something that's just lying there and waiting for something to happen. It's really, when you shoot, it's moving in your shoulder, but you're still stronger than the machine gun. And I think a lot of people have problem with the noise because it's rather violent. I mean, 20 shots a second.
Yeah, I mean, you feel it everywhere. I mean, we felt it.
It's vibrating.
Yeah, where we were, it was quite interesting. I felt all machine guns. I felt in the upper body area, but the MG42 I also felt in the thighs and the legs. So you felt the power difference. I mean, it was, as far as I remember, the most strong round we had there, the 8mm Mauser. Yeah,
it's really on the upper end of power levels. I mean, it's around, let's say, for calculations, it's around 4,000 joules of energy, one shot, and 20 rounds a second is 80,000 joules of energy. That translate into your body a little bit. And that you feel, but it's not uncontrollable.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
Honestly, I have more problems with certain types of submachine guns. That they are just so cheaply made that you are afraid that they will fall apart or I don't know what. And I mean, when we shot the PPS 43, I consider it, well, recoil is not relevant in submachine gun. This is really nothing. But it's really just metal and it moves around because of that heavy ball that's moving around inside the gun. And then we had the problem with the ammo, and
you told me to hold it down at the magazine because it could explode early, and it did happen. And I was like, what happened now? And then I was like, okay, if I had my hand up there, I probably would have a burn or something.
Well, you learned from my experience. I had a burn last time when I shot it, and they had a out of battery detonation. But that comes again back to ammunition. The 7.62 Tokarev in my country is again soon gone. We don't have surplus anymore, and we only can get commercial ammo, which is honestly too weak. And we will do, I guess, a video about this then one day, about commercial ammo to military produced ammo.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and these are common problems as for collectors.
Do we have anything to add? Because we're already nearing 1 hour.
I don't think for the moment. If there are maybe questions from the comments, maybe we can address them in a later podcast or something.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Phil, for giving us many insights in both machine guns and for being here.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye.